Hello, everybody. Oh, there's hello, Arifa Akbar. Very nice to see you there. Kim,
hi.
Lovely. That's a lovely sofa you've got there. What kind of patterning is that? Absolutely, yes. I thought it was. Yes. Okay, we've got John Ryle, who appears to be a hedgehog made out of pencils. But we are an inclusive festival, so we are happy to welcome all sorts. Clarissa is really working with the beautiful lighting there. That's really great coming through your window. Lovely. Zoe has gone for the kind of the Newsnight style bookcase behind, as has Astrid. Very nice. I'm kind of like rocking that same thing with my bookcase. Who else have we got coming in? No other people with their cameras on. A lot of people are hiding. Okay. Maggie Ash appears to be a tunnel. Okay. Who else have we got here? Hello, Sam. Sam, there's a plant which appears to be about to attack you. So beware of that for tonight's performance. Just want to say, who else have we got? I think Beck is downing shots, it would appear, I think, if I know her. Right, who else? Gosh, so many people. Suman with her shopping list on the fridge in the background. Don't forget the coffee beans. It's incredibly important. Guatemalan is my preference, but you know, whatever you like. Okay. Right. Well, I think we've probably got enough people here. Welcome, everyone. First, I just want to share some housekeeping to improve your viewing experience this evening. So just some things that you can do to set up your Zoom. So first of all, if you guys, on your Zoom console, if you want to move your cursor to the top right of the screen, there should be an icon with 4 corners, like that, which says full screen. So if you please click on that icon, that should bring you up full screen. And just next to that button is another which says speaker view. So if you all click on that icon now, please. So hopefully that means you'll now just be seeing me on your screen. If everything is working right, yes, great. You lucky guys. So finally, in the bottom left of your screen, I'm not sure which bottom left, I'm not sure, you know what left is. The bottom left of your screen, there should be an icon of a microphone, which will allow you to mute or unmute. Hopefully you're all currently muted, but just want to make sure that you stay muted so we don't have any interruptions. And next to that icon is another option to stop or start your video. Some of you have got your video on, some of you got your video off. We'd encourage you to have your video on so that we've got more of a live theatre experience, as close as we can to that at the moment. And so you can maybe wave at one another. Obviously the other person won't know that you're waving at them, but you know, maybe that will bring you a greater sense of community. But you can turn your camera off if you need to. Maybe if you need to go to the toilet and you would like to take me with you to the toilet, which is an understandable instinct, but you might not want everyone to see your business, so you might choose to turn your camera off at that point, but do turn it back on when you return so we can carry on seeing all of your lovely faces. Also, elsewhere on your screen, hopefully you should have some kind of gallery of the other people who are watching the show. So that's your audience, that's who you're sitting with. If you move your cursor to the top of that little gallery, there's 3 options to either hide all the gallery of faces, next to that just to see a single one, which will probably be me, and the third one is as you might have it now, so you can see everyone. If you want, you can scroll through them. Just to say that some of our pieces this evening are animations and videos and films, and if you want, you might want to see more, so you might just want to get rid of some of the gallery faces so you can focus on the animation. Finally, for any of you who might have any kind of access needs, we do have closed captions for this evening's performance. So at the bottom of the Zoom down here, there's an option which says closed caption. Click on that if you want any kind of captions. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Okay, I assume you can. God, it's weird not being in front of a live audience. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and friends beyond the binary, welcome to We Are Not Virus. Thank you very, very much to the festival organisers and to Omnibus Theatre for putting on tonight's festival. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm incredibly honoured to be invited to be the first act of the proceedings this evening. I'm B Jung, that's B-E-A, B like the thing that goes bzz, and Jung like the name you can't pronounce. I've got a 2-1 in computer science. I'm a stamp aficionado, a former data analyst, and now I'm a stand-up comedian. Well, no, I suppose these days I'm more of a sit-down in front of a computer comedian, but anyway, here I am. Actually, no, let's try this standing up. So I'm just going to move this here. Okay, yes. Now, I'm a stand-up comedian. It's pretty weird seeing myself on a screen like this. Almost makes me feel important. And finally, representation. Am I right? No, I mean, this is my first time doing a show where I can hear myself when I perform, actually. It's pretty surreal. Normally I can only hear myself, and it's interesting when I hear myself because I think it must be pretty weird for other people to experience me. There's this disconnect between my face and my voice. I feel like when people see me, they think, aha, dim sum. But then I open my mouth and they're like, oh, fish and chips? Although these days it's not so much dim sum. It's not even sweet and sour chicken. No, it tends to be more bat soup. I think I definitely liked it better when it was dim sum. I even liked it better when it was dog, because at least that was a joke, right? But you know, being stuck at home all day, I almost miss people asking me where I'm from. It's a weird question though, right? Come on, isn't that a weird question? Where are you from? I'm not sure how I'm supposed to answer that. The UK? London? Colindale? Northwick Park Hospital. Oh, my mother's womb. Go back to where you're from. Sure thing. I'm just gonna crawl back inside here. No, kidding. Obviously, and can't do that. Wouldn't want to do that. It's Anyway, it's a weird question though, isn't it? Where are you from? I've always thought of myself as British. I mean, I really am white British. I played football. I do. I love Bake Off. I have a mild existential crisis whenever someone asks me, how are you? I average about 4.8 Tesco meal deals every week and make approximately 17.4 trips to Greg's every month. And, there's the maths. That'll be the ethnic part of me slipping out. Well, yes. Anyway, there's lots of people like me in this country. British East Asians, and that's British with a capital T. And biscuits, because we drink a lot of tea in this. Anyway, that's why I do what I do, because I want everyone to know we're just as British as everyone else, because well, we're not very well represented. You know, there's a lot of us, but there's not many of us on telly or in the news. We're not very visible. Well, I suppose we are these days. I mean, there's photos of us in masks in every headline, and we're all over social media. I mean, okay, look at Twitter, for example. Let's see. Dirty people gave the virus to the rest of us. Our lives have been completely disrupted because the Chinese have a fucking craving for bats. Bat-eating, wet market-selling, virus-making, greedy bastards, we should nuke them all, would be a good purging. Oh, it's a bit much, mate. Dirty communist chinks with the... Anyway, you get the idea, okay? We're everywhere right now. It's like we're all celebrities. In some ways, it's what I've always wanted. Except well, that's the thing, it's not us. That's, that's Chinese people, especially mainland Chinese people. And I'm not a mainlander. How can I be a mainlander? I mean, Britain's an island, after all. But, you know, a lot of people seem to think I am. I've been reading a lot of articles about how we're being shouted at and abused and attacked and stabbed. And by we, I mean any Asian. So Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean Ease, British Ease, like everyone, okay? You know, there's a whole explosion of racism right now, you know, a real pandemic of it. Because we're in a pandemic. So, anyway, well, at least I am safe in here. But you know, I've had a lot of time to think being stuck in here. This is the first time I've ever dealt with proper, real, 5-star racism, you know? I feel like it's not something we British East Asians face much of. I mean, sure, you get the odd, go back to your own country, and people make jokes about our eyes or our food or eating dogs, but you know, that's just it. It's jokes. There's no harm in it. I mean, I make jokes like that sometimes too, as well. It's almost time for dinner. The dog should be ready by now. Oh, God, people are so sensitive these days. I mean, we're all British here, okay? We're supposed to be good at humour. You know, it's a bit of banter. Anyway, it's just jokes. Before, anyway, that's all it was. We really didn't have it that bad otherwise, and now it's a pandemic, isn't it? So, can't help it. People are angry, and they'll always look for someone to blame. And well, they're blaming Chinese people right now. It's just a shame they can't tell the difference between us. You know, British Chinese and Chinese Chinese. But it is what it is. You know, maybe we should all get shirts saying, I'm not Chinese Chinese. Well, anyway, it's not like I can blame everyone for being angry at Chinese people. I'm pretty angry at them myself. Why wouldn't I be? They don't have the best track record, do they? What with the oppression and censorship and concentration camps and racism and all the other things you hear about on the news. I mean, it's awful. God, like, what an awful country. And even the good they do, like that hospital they built in 10 days. Well, you know what they say about things made in China, right? So probably the
turning my calls.
Sorry, can you mute yourself, whoever that is?
Zhang Yifeng, I've been trying to look for you for the last few days. Why haven't you been returning my calls?
Theatre person.
No, you don't do anything. Listen, I've hunted you down and I want to have this conversation with you. Why are you making this stupid talk about making China?
Going on. That's my sister. So
yes, indeed. And you shouldn't be making such stupid jokes. You're like Alison Pearson.
I'm gonna be 2 minutes. I just need to sort out these technical issues. Okay, 2 minutes.
No. You don't. If I got, oh, you twerp. Oh, you can run, but you can't hide. I'm going to look for you. Hello?
What the fuck do you think I'm doing? I'm in the middle of a show.
What the fuck do you think you're doing, not returning my phone calls?
Oh my God, what time is it even over there right now?
What, it's 2 a.m.?
Mm-hmm.
How's Mum?
Better, I think. They should be discharging her next week, unless she catches COVID. But
I swear to God, if I ever catch the cunt who did this to her. Have you seen her this week?
Not yet. I'll call her sometime.
Call her tonight.
Yeah, I will. I've been busy.
With what? Your dead stand-up.
It's not dead. What jokes, man?
What jokes? You still doing that cringy ass ching chong ping long, let's laugh at the funny Chinaman bullshit.
Oh, why don't you stop being such a snowflake?
Oh.
What? It's funny.
That's our own parents you're making fun of, you know? 你真是不要脸.
We're English. Speak English.
No shit like that. It's the reason things are so bad at the moment.
Oh, here we go with the social justice warrior China pride.
Will you listen?
No, you listen. Things have never been this bad before, but I'm sure it will pass. We just have to
oh my God.
on the chin and show that we're different from Chinese people.
Oh yeah, because when some racist pulls up on you, he'll be like, pardon me, sir, may I inquire, were you born in England, mainland China, some other place of the Chinese diaspora, or perchance of other East or Southeast Asian origin?
If we start making the distinction that they'll listen, we just have to prove we are different from the mainlanders.
Mainlanders like Mum, like Dad, like me, like you.
I am not a fucking mainlander.
Yes, you are, bro. And the sooner you accept it and get over this weird Downton Abbey British bake-off, jolly old England thing you're doing.
You can fucking talk.
What?
Don't think I haven't clocked your Facebook, the way you changed your last name from Jung to Chang.
That's a professional thing. You know I work in corporate.
I saw you changed how you write your Chinese name too. Simplified to traditional. Interesting.
Fred looks nicer.
You said yourself that traditional characters are a fucking eyesore.
Well, I'm used to them now.
When was the last time you spoke Mandarin in public?
I'm in Hong Kong. Everyone here speaks Cantonese, so obviously
or
I should...
maybe you're just scared.
Scared of what?
Admit it, you don't want people knowing you're a mainlander. You'll get the shit kicked out of you.
It's not the same thing as your weird England fetish.
Well, at least I can admit I was born here. At least I can say I'm proud of British culture.
Oh, British culture, yeah? What? Brexit, imperialism, and tea. Oh wait, tea is not even British. That's us still.
Who's us? Is that China or Hong Kong? You don't even know which one
It's
you are.
all Chinese culture.
No, you're just picking and choosing how Chinese you want to be when it's convenient.
Hong Kongers are Chinese too.
Not sure they'd be happy with you saying that.
Oh, stop twisting my words. You know what I meant.
Why don't you just admit that when it comes down to it, you don't want people knowing you're a mainlander either? How is that any better than me? You know what saying you're proud to be Chinese means? It means you're proud to be a part of eating bats and dogs and racism and neocolonialism and the CCP.
I'm proud of being part of more than that. About 5,000 years of culture more.
Then change your name back.
I can't.
Why? Go on.
Fine. You're right. I'm scared.
Knew it.
But how does that make me any different from you? Aren't you scared of people being mean to you because you're Chinese? Isn't that why you do this bootlicking white adjacent modern minority bullshit?
No, it's not because I'm scared. It's because I'm proud to be British.
Off he goes again.
No, racism barely even exists here.
It doesn't exist here. I mean, oh my God, are you stupid?
No, well, not towards us.
You're out of your mind, you know. People have always been racist to us. It was always in the air. But no one took it seriously. We didn't even take it seriously. We didn't need to. We're doctors and lawyers and engineers. We haven't got time to haven't got time to kind of, worry about shit like that. We just need to sit down, shut up and work and it'll all be calm. Instead of fighting back, we just kept cracking jokes too. We've been comfy being a joke because it's better than being loud and aggressive, right? So we didn't fight for anyone. We didn't fight for ourselves. We didn't fight for anyone either. So now who's in our corner? No one's fighting for us. We're getting beaten and stabbed and killed. And still no one's taking this seriously. And it's because of people like you that Mum's in the hospital.
What? Don't you fucking dare pin that on me.
Well, you have to take responsibility. Basically, legitimizing racists to be racist towards us. And you are basically... Hello? Ugh. Twerp.
How do I get this stuck? Was I not on mute? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to hear all of that. This is, I mean, she's crazy, right? Like bonkers. Every day it's the same. Oh, we need to rise up. Oh, we can't allow ourselves to be complacent. Oh, we need a revolution. All right, Stalin or Mao, I should probably say. Look, I'm proud to be British, and that's what I am. Whatever anyone or even my sister says, okay, not Chinese. I'm every time I look in the fucking mirror, fucking straight black hair, slanted eyes, yellow fucking skin. I can't just ignore it anymore, you know? How the fuck am I supposed to ignore it when everyone keeps reminding me what I am? The staring, the glares. I don't want to be next. I don't want to end up on the news because of something I'm not responsible for. I didn't start fucking Corona. That was the Chinese people, not me. And so no, never. I'll never be Chinese. I don't know the first thing about China. Don't care about it. Don't understand anything about it. How can I be something that I don't even understand? We need to prove ourselves. We need to prove our Britishness, okay? Separate ourselves from them. I'll never be Chinese, okay? So I'll never ever be Chinese. Sorry, just let me. Here's my mum. I'm just gonna let her get to voicemail. I'll never. I'm so sorry about this, guys. It's just, yeah. Let me just wait. Mum. Yeah. I'm fine actually. I'm sorry. I've been yes, I've been drinking lots of Rocheway. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Hey, Mum. Mama. I'm sorry. 我想你，每天都想你。你有注意身体健康过？好，拜拜。
After Sam's mum is involved in a serious accident, she tells him he has a half-sister. Sam decides to find her, but the only information he has to go on is the name of the town where her dad lived over 20 years ago. He travels there anyway. On his arrival, a woman greets him outside the railway station with a tray of herbal tea samplers. Her name is Colette. It's raining, so he gives her his umbrella. They become friends. 2 weeks later, Sam and Colette are talking about their families. Sam's parents divorced when he was young. Colette never knew hers. She was raised by foster parents called Rob and Jill. They eat custard creams while watching the One show. Colette cries with laughter during a segment on police dogs. That night, as they're walking back from the pub, Sam asks if they might be related. "I'm looking for my half-sister," he says. "No." "How can you be sure?" "How likely is it?" "I don't know." "We both look Asian, so we must be related." She holds his arm, the alcohol inside her like a large balloon tugging her off the ground. If she weren't holding on to him, she could float away. Colette was 6 years old when her foster parents came to collect her from the train station. Jill laughed, and Rob gave her a balloon. 10 years later, when Rob died, Jill found things hard. She stopped preparing meals, stopped laughing, developed a crick in her neck. It was painful to look at Colette. Then Sam arrived, at the same station, holding an umbrella instead of a balloon, and it felt like a sign. She couldn't say any of this to him, in part because it was ridiculous, in part because if she said it, it might not come true.
After you left, I shut my eyes, a prolonged blink in which I saw an empty forest, which means a forest empty. I read myself an empty forest, and when my eyes open, you weren't gone. I wasn't there. I wasn't there.
There's a new moon. Sam and Colette have grown closer over the summer. Lying in bed drinking tea, their voices overlap and become one. It's not that I didn't think about race. I was the only Chinese-looking girl at school, but boys would ask stupid questions like if I wore a kimono or was into hentai. Girls would say things about my skin and eyelashes. They broke up when I was 12. She had boyfriends, most of them white, most of them fine. One was called Graham and he took me to the zoo. He got angry because they didn't have pandas. The pandas hate it here too, Graham. I guess, looking back, I'd eat alone, go home straight after school. It's not like there weren't options. I got invited to birthday parties and things, but pretend I was busy. Like, I didn't want people to pity me. I'm an only child, but I had close friends. Most of them were white. We talked about boy stuff, played video games. I remember going to a friend's house and he had this stack of FHMs so high he put a bowl of crisps on top. Jill and Rob were great. Jill was different then. They would have done pretty much anything for me, I think. But they never asked what it was like. Maybe it was because, they were scared. They wanted things to be good, for it to be good. And it was. mostly. I shut a door in my head and became like one of those people who operate construction cranes. I could pick things up and put them down again. Everything's small and far away. I feel fine with how I look. As much as you can. Maybe I've let guys take things too far or been with guys I didn't like because they were into me and I didn't trust myself. I didn't think I'd make the right choice. I've been with the wrong people, sure. It's not like I've had bad experiences. I got used to not thinking for myself, not thinking I could be happy. You know, happy, the way some people are. The way they know when they've made a choice. They know when someone likes them and they like them back and they're happy.
Once we were 7 golden birds in matching suits with slightly different shoes, who 7 days a week woke up before the leaves turned green, and with our little tweezers kept the park moss clean. Ooh, 7 days we worked and 7 days we sang. Ooh, until the whole park looked perfectly serene. Apple peel, silk screen, new paint sheen. Dad's late again, but he brings us all gifts. Last time it was a mask in the shape of a lion's face. I wore each night to sleep for 7 weeks, for 7 weeks.
It's August, and so hot that Sam can almost see the beads of sweat hanging in the air, gravityless. He thinks about Colette, about how much he wants to talk to her. Stress comes in bundled waves. He laughs. On his way back from the shops, 2 boys follow him. One says he has a knife. The other asks for his wallet. It ends meekly. He gives them a £10 note and they run away shouting, "Chink!" Sam wants to talk to Colette, but he can't find her anywhere. When he gets back to his flat, he opens his laptop and finds a document called Family Scenarios. Not long after they met, Sam and Colette started making up these family scenarios. Sometimes they would just be sentence-long ideas, alternative families, ideas about the family. Sometimes they were complicated vignettes involving animals, and the setting might be the moon. Sometimes they were just conversations. Often, there was no family at all. They made them up to pass the time. Later, Sam typed them up and arranged them prettily on the page with little notes about the context, where he could remember it. With Colette gone, he reads through them again. Family Scenario 13. It's always night on the moon. They do things differently here.
They do things differently.
Babies are plucked like weeds from the bottom of a milky sea. Puberty only hurts for a second. Instead of talking, adults lie next to each other in craters of warm sand. no one is related. Everyone is in love.
Instead of talking, adults lie next to each other in craters of warm sand. No one is related. Everyone is in love.
Sam can't remember who said this, or if they both did. As he reads the words over, he fears that Colette is far away and maybe in danger. In fact, she's visiting a friend in a nearby town. A few days later, they'll meet for coffee and she'll apologise, before telling him that she's moving away. To Rome. It rhymes with dome. They'll spend the rest of the summer together, and when Colette travels to Rome to study Italian, Sam will go back to the city, having given up looking for his half-sister. The only trace of their relationship will be the family scenarios they made up.
What if I had a brother or a sister who died? It's a terrible thing to think. I could have a dead brother or sister and not realize.
I think on some levels, I've always struggled with racial identity. Growing up in a multicultural household, I didn't know what I was meant to be, but I was fine with that. I just thought it as an interesting fact that made me different and exciting. Till someone said, "You're like..." What were they implying? I'll never forget this one day in school when a group of girls, thinking they were cool, got these Chinese characters up on their computer screens. One of the girls leans in real close to me and says, "Are you Chinese, Japanese, or some relation to Jet Li? I need you to do something for me. I need you to translate this. So good luck." I turned to her, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "It means go get fucked." I was also quick to see that no one knows the difference. People identify me with absolute confidence. See, people tend to think we are all the same. And going through school, they love to play the Where in Asia name game. Of course, there were more incidences where I felt singled out. And for a long while, I wrestled with this feeling of self-doubt. But as I got older, I took it all in my stride, gaining momentum, getting curious, and building this pride, until someone very recently said, and you can see why this statement filled me with dread, "You people have got such a chip on your shoulder." This is one account, one experience, and one voice out of many. But this virus has blinded a select few against humanity. Now I need to use my voice to try and reach this profanity, to help stop it in its tracks. Once this devil's unleashed, it's very hard to turn back. Again and again, we have seen this before. how the power of words is used to fuel war against blacks, Jews, Native Americans, and more. This is why it's so important to fight, to bring this lack of awareness back into the light. However, despite all this, and several months down the line, I've been sitting here, finding it harder and harder to feel fine with all these whirling thoughts going through my mind. It doesn't take a lot just to be kind. So I'm coming to you feeling quite tired. Still seeing so many people acting so wired on this energy that spread quicker than the virus. It's fear. Fear and anger. A concoction that brings with it so much danger. And I found this really confusing. That some people are so keen to retaliate and continue abusing the power they have to make all this spread. This world of racial equality, is it really dead? And I'm here wondering why. Why is this topic so hard to equate? Going round in circles, yet another debate. Is respect too much to demand? Does the colour of my skin give others some weird upper hand? COVID-19, China die, you Asians all spread the disease, now it's your turn to cry. But I've seen children looking to their parents wondering why. Why won't the children play with me at school? Why did that teacher single me out for coughing like I'm a fool? Why am I sitting on the bus getting abuse from someone who's taken these headlines as truth? It's a Chinese virus plotted and planned. Mix it up a little bit, it's spread with broadband. Don't forget, it comes from their food. Take one look at it, it must be true. Tear them all down, they're exploiting every nation. Every single one of them is carrying this contagion. And don't forget, it could be in the air they breathe. Move down the carriage. I don't want an Asian sitting next to me. This is sifting down amongst the public. My sisters walked into town and watched people judge it. Hearing statements like these makes it so easy to forget that behind the targeted faces are also individuals scared, hurt, and upset. And I'm seeing online all these stories of human beings lashing out in their fury. A broken nose, pulled hair, and 2 black eyes. We're all locked in our homes because of you. Fuck off and die, they said, as the fury spread, choosing the fire instead. Christ, does this fill me with dread? This is what happens when you allow false information to spread. It seeps out into society, grasping every thread it can get, looking for weakness, a chink in the armor, a crack, searching for something solid to grip and attack. Do we deserve what we're getting? Are people across the world forgetting that a government is different from a person? Except now, we've been put in the same boat and hundreds of people are hurting. However, some powers that be have said it's not their fault. Point your fingers at experiments instead. But the damage has been done. Let's not use this as a blueprint for what's to come. No government has immunity. Every single one is under some sort of scrutiny. Bottom line, I think, if the government acted quicker, used less time to bicker, solidarity and strength would not have been spread thin. These climbing numbers are not competitions we want to win. Looking out at the field, we all had a part to play, a chess piece to move, and a chance to say, look at what's coming our way. We have to get serious. If we all act quickly, you can put your faith in us. But with so much space to edge this way and that, it's resulted in this racial political spat where everyone's getting down each other's throats, deflecting the blame, nominating a scapegoat. But every word you say has a massive effect on how some behave. People taking back control, placing the blame elsewhere. Picking out the most likely culprit to them only seems fair. It's really disturbing to see people like me getting the short end of the stick. When discrimination is ingrained this much, it is difficult to unpick. Meanwhile, across the globe, magic is returning. Mother Nature is throwing off the robe of pollution, working so hard to put her to sleep. Now there's a chance, a glimmer of hope that she can get back on her feet. Animals creeping out with no people to meet. Talking poetry on pavements with the kids next door is something we've definitely never done before. And over the fences, small acts of kindness, newfound gestures that constantly remind us, in times like this, we need unity to join gaps, mend hearts, and build a community. There is still time to change this and make amends. Using words as weapons leads to dead ends. Everything we've achieved in this crucial chapter will ultimately be wasted if we don't look at the change and start to embrace it. We, all of us, have made huge sacrifices in this period of time, this unprecedented crisis. It's reached us all in our homes, across the world. It doesn't matter what background you're from, we've all watched it unfurl. We're at this pivotal point in time to stop, pause, think, and rewind some of these adverse racial effects. They're all taking their toll. Which minority will be next? Difficulty like this shines a light on what we need to change as we make the first steps into a new age. I'll take this moment to inject some words that reflect, a thought to carry in our minds as we progress. People will never forget how you made them feel. To everyone out there feeling hurt, targeted, and rejected, your voice deserves to be heard, listened to, and respected.
With all due respect, I doubt that's the case here. Can I reorder it then? And how long? Oh, wow. Oh, no, forgive me. I'm not having a go. It's just, I've already been waiting for 2 weeks. I understand. No, it's not your fault. Yeah, I suppose I can do that. Sorry, do I want a refund instead? I don't know. Well, yes, please. Amazing, superb. No, that's everything. Sure. I'd say, mildly satisfied. No worries. Take care. You too. Bye, thank you, bye-bye. For fuck's sake. Oh. What am I going to do now? In my defense, your hinge thing was kind of loose to start with, and super glue wasn't super enough. And I tried to fix you again for like the 10th time, but this time something was stuck. And it's not like I punched you or anything. It's just, you know, when you're frustrated and the frustration takes you over and your body reacts before you can think. I may have inadvertently pushed you harder than I should have. Now you're worse than ever. Could have been worse, I suppose. I could have kicked the toilet bowl instead. Hey, that was kind of funny thinking back on it now. You know, Matt? He kicked this toilet bowl because he thought it was spinning. It was so wasted. And he flushed it, not realizing he'd made this massive hole. The carpet stank for a week. Oh, this time I have no one to blame but myself. Does it make things easier? I don't know. Guess it wasn't just you I was mad at. What to do when good old Amazon isn't being helpful? Duct tape's an option, though I'd have to be extra careful not to wiggle my ass too much as I wipe. Gotta keep it as still as possible, otherwise I'd end up pushing the seat or putting too much weight to one side. Man, this is a serious matter. It's harder than it sounds. All the while, trying to maintain my dignity. Or I could go to the shop and get a new one. Simple. Ugh. God, I must look bonkers. This is my new habit. I talk as if someone's actually listening. When you're lying in bed and you come up with a good comeback or a quip, so you say it out loud to an imaginary audience to get it out of your system. Except I do it all the time. Like literal verbal diarrhea. That and I get emotional over nothing. Things escalate real quick and after a couple of minutes I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Can't just be me though, right? I mean, I wonder how awkward people become. Charlie said that she likes to make weird noises or just say like random things for no reason. That she has this urge that comes out of nowhere, like, can't believe Dad sent me that. I found a t-shirt. Says, surprise, surprise, I'm not Chinese. I think you should wear it to avoid hassles. Please tell me you're joking. That you genuinely believe that's the problem here. That people can't tell I don't have Chinese genes in my body. And yeah, of course, Mum wants me to move back in and go to church with the, I don't know. I just can't. I mean, the real conundrum here is I haven't left my house in months. Not even to get my essentials or daily exercise. It's a bit mad, that, isn't it? Yeah, maybe I do need to go out after all before I go completely mental. Maybe, most likely, it'd be fine. I'd be like, whoa, what was I so scared of? I know things are changing out there, but it's just that the unprecedented circumstances become my new normal. It's quite eye-opening, actually, how long you can go on without leaving your place, how quickly you get used to the changes. I'm not talking about the deliveries or the Zoom meetings. There's this sense of security. Not having to feel that prickling sensation in my chest when someone glances in my direction. And the strange relief when someone sits next to me on the tube without hesitation. You put in your headphones to block out any potential unpleasant remarks. Trying not to look around just in case you're met with funny looks. Feeling so visible. But yeah, everything passes, even a global pandemic. So sometimes leaves a scar. And that scar becomes a reminder. Wow, that was really sappy. And I know what they'd say. They're like, oh, I know it's shitty that there are racists around, but you can't let it get to you forever. It's not healthy. There are pricks out there anyway, and even, oh, I think you're being a little bit paranoid. I've heard it all. But it's easy to just say these things, isn't it? Like, you shouldn't drink so much Coca-Cola, or just breathe. Like, fuck that breathing. Some things can't be blown away. I still remember that walk to Lush I was going to get one of those generic gift sets. The safest option when you have no clue what to buy them, but you're still obliged to buy them something. I was walking, my eyes glued on my phone. I don't know how I managed to survive the pre-GPS era, and I heard it. "You off to get back, sausage?" A middle-aged geezer standing outside a pub. His face like a red moon. I looked around. A woman with a walking stick, looking hopeless and bewildered. "Not in this country," he shouted at her. My first reaction, relieved. Relieved because it wasn't me. All I could think was, I gotta make myself invisible before he spots me. Not fast enough. And there's another one. They're everywhere. This country is swamped with virus. The pint glass flew above my head and smashed. My pulse was racing. I could actually hear it. Oh shit. Oh shit. It's finally my turn. What were those witty marks I prepared? I couldn't think of any of them. The more I searched, the more distant they felt. The words were disappearing and memories flooded my mind instead. Me, on the first day of school, the 8-year-old kid who doesn't speak English, the stares, the words I couldn't find. All those years of trying to blend in, the joy of finally becoming like a regular kid, like every other teenager. The fear that something might be brought up to highlight the difference. The casual slurs, the names I've been given, this time a virus. And here I was in the middle of fucking Oxford Street. I stood out again. I was not one of them, the normal bystanders. The woman with the walking stick started speaking rapidly to me in a language I didn't understand. She was looking at me. I should have manned up and stood up for her, for myself. I'm not the kid who still needs Miss Robinson to come rescue from bullies anymore. I should have taught him a lesson. This stupid cunt who thought he could define my whole being. Nah, you're the virus, mate. Too bad there's no vaccine against it. Hatred and ignorance. And I don't want you in this country either. I still fantasize about it. I film it as I crush him. And I ooze confidence. And I'm so cool. And it goes viral. And it shows that we are not just a bunch of quiet, foreign-looking people you can walk over. Or I could have said, "Oh, I feel a sneeze coming," and laughed in his scared face. Charlie's done that. I could have at least asked her if she was okay. Anything but running away. When I hear about these stories about these people being attacked, people who look like me, I ask myself, what if I hadn't run? Like, could I have done something to make the smallest bit of difference, and I didn't? Does the moon-faced man lose sleep like me? Tossing and turning with suffocating guilt? And should I leave my safe haven for an intact toilet seat? And let them see me? I could get some beers on the way.
I am not deaf. There is no need to shout at me.
I am not a tourist.
Britain is my home.
I am not a sex slave.
I'm not an oriental dainty.
I have never loved anyone, or will ever love someone, long time.
I am not yellow.
I am not a peril.
I am not your scapegoat.
I am not a virus.
I am not your diversity.
I am not a token.
I am not a myth.
I am not fictitious.
I am not expendable.
I am not invisible.
I am not meek.
I am not mild.
I am not a virus.
I am not silent.
I am not acquiescent.
I am not a damsel that needs a white knight.
I am not a heathen.
I am not uncouth.
I am not an athlete.
I am not a virus.
I am not a harbinger of death.
I am not a disease.
I'm not a leper to be shunned.
I'm not an object to be abused.
I am not a calling.
I am not a friend.
I am not a virus.
I am the receptionist you ignored.
I am the retail assistant that you made fun of.
I am the customer service assistant who you mocked.
I am the usherette you were rude to.
I am the waitress you didn't tip.
I'm the person you verbally abused on the bus.
I'm the delivery driver that you complained about because I look the way I do.
I am the job candidate you rejected.
I am the cleaner you never see.
I'm the teacher you got fired because my face does not mirror yours.
I am not a virus.
I'm the person who held open the door but you ignored.
I am the person you spat at on the tube.
I am the child you excluded.
And a teenager you abused.
I am the missing person that was never found.
I'm the battered partner.
I am the business owner that has lost their livelihood.
I am the murder victim.
I am the forgotten hero.
I am the person you drove to suicide.
I do not eat dogs.
I do not eat cats.
I do not eat raw bat.
I do not eat wild snake.
I do not import infected antelope meat.
I am not a headache.
I'm a neighbor.
I am you.
I am not a virus.
I am a human being.
Ako ay tao.
I am a daughter. I am a mother.
I am a father.
I am a wife.
I am a husband.
I breathe.
I bleed.
I grieve. I love.
I want.
I cry. I am your ignorance.
I am what you hate.
I am that unanswered prayer.
I am the tears shed in darkness.
I am the hands clasped around the husk of a loved one.
I am grief.
I am loneliness.
I am not a virus.
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 I am not a virus. I am not a virus.
I am not a virus.
I am not a virus.
I am not a virus.
I am not a virus.
I am not a virus.
I'm not a virus.
We now have a 5-minute comfort break before we come back for the panel discussion. And the time now is 8:10, so we will come back at 8:15. So see you then for the panel discussion. So hello and welcome back. Just waiting for the camera to come on. Okay, so welcome back to the WeRNotVirus panel discussion, which explores COVID-related racism towards East and Southeast Asians in the UK. We'll also be discussing the lack of East and Southeast Asian voices in the media. This discussion is going to run for about 25 minutes, after which time we'll have about 20 minutes for questions and answers from the audience. The panel discussion won't be captioned, but a full transcript will be available after the event. So on the panel tonight, we have Rebecca Boey, who is a graduate of the Royal Court Young Writers Programme and the BBC Writers' Room, London's Voice Group. She's an ex-Vice Chair of Equity's recently resigned Race and Equality Committee and an active member of Beats. She wrote and starred in a comedy web series called Jade Dragon. Pham is a freelance journalist and an MA student. He writes on the themes of belonging, race and identity, and is also a strong advocate for social justice. He's most notably written and produced media content for The Guardian and has also appeared on the BBC, LBC and Sky News. And then lastly, we have Jessie Lau, who is a freelance journalist, researcher and artist from Hong Kong. Her work has been published by The Economist, Foreign Policy and The Nation. She serves as a board member and online editor-in-chief of New Voices, a collective supporting women working on China subjects, and was formerly a Hong Kong and China reporter with the South China Morning Post. So according to data released by the UK police, the rate of hate crimes against Chinese from January to March this year nearly tripled that of the previous 2 years. At least 267 offences were recorded against Chinese, East Asian and Southeast Asians during the first 3 months of the year. That's compared to 375 hate crimes for the whole of 2019. So I just wanted to start by asking each of the panel members if you would like to give us a perspective on your experiences of this situation. So we start with Rebecca.
Oh, hi. I definitely noticed a change happen around the start of this, the start of COVID becoming known about. I think beforehand, I'd always been aware of racism that was more mocking, making fun of us, ridiculing us. I'd have, the usual people shouting "ni hao" at you on the street, or like pulling slanty eyes, people saying "ching chong." That was just that happened a lot. But I'd never felt the way I felt when people started not sitting next to me on the tube. I really noticed it, really noticed it. The people, you'd notice someone come onto the tube, walk towards you to the empty seat next to you, and then clock you and then walk away. That happened a lot. But yeah, just before lockdown, I think the thing that really shocked me, that personally happened to me, was getting a bus door shut on me, which was really awful. The bus pulled up and I was the first person in the queue. So I stepped on, and as I stepped on, I saw him spot me and the doors just shut on me, knocked me into the bus. So I fell over, but into the bus. And I stood up and I was like, I just assumed that it had been a mistake. I said, why did you do that? You just knocked me over. And, if it had been a mistake, I would have expected the bus driver to say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. There's some kind of technical failure. But no, he just smirked at me. So that was pretty shocking. I don't think I'd ever had anything like that before. I was in a way kind of pleased that lockdown happened, because I feel a lot safer not having to go outside.
Sure. And Sam, what have your experiences been?
Yeah, so I have written a bit on my experience, and I think very similar to you, Rebecca, is before lockdown in January, this is when news started to filter in about the coronavirus. And me personally, I was working in London at the time, and I remember on my commute, people interacting with me differently, moving away from me, not wanting to sit next to me. You know, the glances, the kind of little racism. And then as the story kind of grew, I started seeing it happen more overtly. I started hearing about it. I've spoken about my experience where I was walking on a train and someone raised their hand to hit me. So just seeing it come into, you know, physical violence, it's kind of like very scary territory. And I do think that this violence are symptoms of us not being represented in the media and not having a role in putting those stories out.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that, Sam?
Yeah, so when I was working in the media, I had the opportunity to go to different head offices for different news outlets, and it was very eye-opening to me. You know, I was almost always, apart from The Guardian, the only British East and Southeast Asian person in the room. And I feel like as people of colour, we're very receptive to that. We always know when we're the only person in the room and everyone else is mostly white. And so, I mean, there is a statistic by City that was conducted a few years back, which was that the British journalism industry was 96% white. So it's just interesting. It kind of asks the question, how are we reporting on the world that we live in accurately if we're not represented in the newsroom, if the newsroom doesn't represent reality?
Thank you. And can I bring Jess in now? Jess, could you tell us a little bit about your perspective or your experiences?
Hi, yes, thank you for inviting me on the panel. It's thank you for sharing, Sam, Beck, both your experiences. I think it's really interesting because I'm not British East Asian. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and actually this is kind of my first. I've only spent about 2 years, almost 2 years now in the UK. And for me, what was interesting is my background is reporting on China and Hong Kong and other parts of Asia. And I started reporting on the coronavirus earlier this year from the very start of the outbreak on the situation in Wuhan in China. And I was reporting for Channel 4 News on the story on the ground and watching it unfold. And I had this inkling that you know, with a virus starting from China, that there would be a racist backlash before there was even discussion about this in mainstream media. And so I put out a tentative call on social media, on Twitter and WeChat and other places, just asking Asians if they, in the UK and other places, if they had experienced coronavirus-related racism, and if they would be willing to share their stories with me. And I was really shocked because this was like a Friday, and then I went home and just over the weekend, I got 100 responses from email, messages, texts, with people sharing their stories with me. And then in the weeks that followed, I got about like 50, 60 more responses. And as someone who, I think I'm quite familiar with the diaspora environment, being a Chinese, what it's like to kind of be overseas as a Chinese person. I've lived in California for 7 years and Beijing, but this is, I think, the first time that our community as a global Chinese community has been facing, like in terms of just racism in general, this scope of violence and this widespread racism. And so I was very shocked at both the scope and the severity, that it would kind of not just be kind of name calling and the things that we talked about previously, but, you know, turning into physical violence. And I think what I really liked about the performances in general was that it really, I liked the connection that was tied between how this spike in racism isn't really seen. We can't look at it as an isolated incident. We really have to see it in this, that it comes at this time of rising xenophobia, not just in the UK, but in other countries. And it also comes at this point of increasing geopolitical tension between China in particular and Western countries, and viewing China as this growing threat to this Western global neoliberal order that we live in. And, you know, putting that into context of discussions like Huawei and surveillance, this unease over China's Belt and Road initiative, especially in Europe, issues of Chinese interference in academia in UK universities, and issues of freedom of speech, and also in places like Hong Kong and Xinjiang and Taiwan in terms of being this battleground for liberal values. And so I think I've been kind of thinking about these things and how they relate. And another thing that I really liked about the performances was that it really highlighted how different types of Chinese people, including diaspora or from mainland, from Hong Kong like myself, and other places in Asia, have reacted to this type of racism in a very different way. And I'm really happy to be part of this panel in particular, because it feels like it's kind of an opportunity for us to build these types of solidarities that I personally haven't really experienced before.
Right, yeah, thank you. I just wondered if each of you as well could just try and help us unpick how the coronavirus has been racialized. Jess, did you want to start first?
Sure. I mean, I think, we've spoken a lot about kind of the, not just racism, but in an individual level, but also on a policy level, the idea of kind of, I think it was mentioned, like Donald Trump kind of seeking to brand the virus as a Chinese export, promoting the theory that, it was escaped from a Chinese lab. And also Chinese officials, on the other hand, kind of accusing American soldiers of bringing the virus to Wuhan. And so I think it's been quite interesting to see that this virus has been racialized in this battleground of kind of Chinese versus UK and American propaganda, and this finger pointing and blame game that we're seeing in the mainstream media. And also, I think another important part of the racialization of the virus is looking at the way the Chinese government itself has also racialized the coronavirus in recent months. When you see the virus move away from Wuhan and away from China and towards Europe and the West, and North America in particular, there was a huge backlash within China against foreigners in China. So people, just any type of foreigner. And I think recently the most kind of topical thing to think about is how the Chinese government has racialized coronavirus in terms of looking at migrants and Africans in Guangzhou, for example. And so if you're not familiar with kind of what happened in that context, there was the local government in Guangzhou, which is a southern city in China, started implementing surveillance and conducting compulsory testing and enforcing a 14-day quarantine for all African nationals, even if they had already previously been tested negative for coronavirus and hadn't traveled outside of China. And that's an example of the ways in which racism within China that has always existed against African nationals and other types of foreigners has been racialized because of the coronavirus. And so I'm just bringing that in because I think in the context of Black Lives Matter and the way in which we think about racism as a structural issue and not just an issue of like us as Chinese East Asians or Southeast Asians, we have to look at it in a systematic way. And I think that the way that coronavirus has been racialized in not just the West, but in China and other countries affects all of us.
Yeah, that's a really powerful, astute observation, I think. Sam, have you got anything to add to that? Just in particular on issues on reporting and why it is important particularly for people from Southeast Asian, East Asian backgrounds to be involved in the media and having their voices heard? Yeah,
I think in terms of the racialization of the virus, we see that through the language that is used in reporting. So, when we talk about, or when reports talk about a Chinese virus, or even politicians saying Kung flu, this whole idea of linking an ethnicity with a virus that has killed thousands of people. And, when the media kind of pounces on that and uses this kind of vocabulary, that kind of spreads. And I just think that if there were more people of British, East and Southeast Asians in editorial roles who made these editorial decisions, sometimes it was unintentional, and these unintentional mistakes could have been avoided. I know some newspapers obviously have their agendas, and that's hard as well, but and yeah, I think, for example, we see articles, there was an article about New York and the coronavirus cases in New York, and they used a photo from Hong Kong of Chinese people with face masks. So, there are these very clumsy decisions that add to the racialization of the virus. And yeah, like I said, language is very powerful. It you know, it helps, it can almost influence the way that we perceive reality. And I use the example of how when the news talks about migrants, they talk about them being swarms and invasions, and it's this language that dehumanizes the people behind that. And that's what's happened again with the coronavirus. You know, we're seen as a virus, we're seen as this you know, non-sentient being who has the ability to affect and kill and, you know, be a danger to the Western world. Also, I'm talking very generally, of course, because I don't think that more diversity automatically means that there will be an end to racism and oppression, because there have been instances where people of colour have been in those positions and have been complicit in racism and the oppression, you know, almost kind of pulling the ladder up for the rest of us, rather than amplifying our voices. So I think that's very important. I think another problem in the media is when we talk about, I guess, in terms of having people of colour in journalism, I feel like we're often pigeonholed into this conversation. So we often only get to talk about race and racism and identity, and sometimes it feels a bit exploitative of our trauma, and you know, they don't want to hear what we have to say about politics, about sports or lifestyle, or you know, other topics. So I think it's important that I also think it's important that we are telling our stories firsthand as well. I think Efwa Hirsch puts it very eloquently when she says that it's a dilemma of having the importance of our voices being heard in these spaces, but at the same time not legitimizing those spaces at the same time. So it's a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And just wanted to pick up on that and just ask Bex, in terms of representation on theatre and screen, do you see what effect does that have that we're not seeing the people of East Asian, Southeast Asian heritage being represented on British screens?
I mean, huge. If we're not there, if we don't exist, if we're not platformed and we don't get to tell our stories, it's like we don't exist in society. So I'm part of BEATS, British East Asians in Theatre and on Screen, and one of like our first thing on our website is that we seek to humanise British East and Southeast Asians, which seems like a huge and kind of wild thing to say, to humanise us. Like, are we not human already? But what we mean by that is that if there aren't portrayals of us as normalised people who aren't just racial ciphers, or who don't just exist to represent our ethnicity, then it's like we're not human. And if we're not human, then it's very easy to be racist towards us. It's very easy to lob us all together as a monolith. And it's very easy for things like the cartoon of the rat with the face mask at Lunar New Year that was printed in the Evening Standard to come about, because it's like, well, they're not humans. They're rats that spread virus. And it's something that we have been shouting about for a long, long time, way before coronavirus, that if we're not humanized and if we're not seen as real people and British people, then we're at danger. We are forever kind of on the margins, and we're not accepted as people from this country. Then when things happen elsewhere, abroad, in China, for example, well, that's all of us. We all represent China because nobody knows who we are, because we've not had the opportunity to tell our own stories and stories from our diasporas, because we're from Malaysia, we're from Thailand, from Burma, from China, Japan, Korea. We're huge. East and Southeast Asia is massive, but we're all just lumped together as this monolith. And I think there's a real danger that if we're not allowed our voices and our humanity, that it's very easy to just see us as Chinese Communist Party worker drones who have no feelings and who you can shout racist things at because we're not real people. I wanted to talk about a report on diversity in UK primetime TV that was that Dr. Jamie Rogers published last year in 2019, but it was she'd looked at a year of TV programming. So over a whole year period, she looked at 992 episodes of television. And in over 992 episodes of TV over a whole year, 82% of performers were white, 9% Black, 7% South Asian, 1% Middle Eastern, and 1% East Southeast Asian. 1% of primetime television. And that if we're not represented on television, then we may as well not exist in the minds of the nation. And you know, it's crazy, but and that's in a year that we had Strangers and Chimerica, 2 East Asian shows on the television. 1%.
And do you think there are any issues around those particular programs that you just mentioned there, where we are seeing East Asians, Southeast Asians on screen?
With Strangers and Chimerica, and actually Giri Haji, which was last year, and One Child, which was I think a couple of years ago. These are the big primetime TV shows that have some kind of East Asian representation, and they all are set abroad. They're not here. They're not in the UK. So we are not British. Strangers was in Hong Kong. Chimerica is in Beijing. Giri Haji happens. It's split between Japan and London, but the lead character is from Japan. We are never seen as British. We're always foreigners. We're the perpetual other. So,
Jessie and Sam, what are your thoughts about looking at how East Asians are represented on British screens in particular? What are your thoughts on how they're represented on British screens?
I personally haven't watched too much British TV or cinema, but I will say that it's interesting how we are kind of represented, and there are kind of like stereotypes or roles created for East and Southeast Asians that we kind of almost need to, I used the word pigeonholed before, and you know, as I was doing some research, I found an interesting kind of case. And I don't know if you guys remember earlier this year with the Academy Awards, it was with Lupita Nyong'o, and she didn't get a nomination, but it was a very eye-opening debate on why that was. So it was basically saying that because she didn't fulfill the roles that the industry has delegated to people of colour, and that she didn't fulfill the typical role, she wasn't rewarded for it. So for example, 34 Black women were recognised in Oscar history before in leading actress and supporting actress roles, but all of those roles were either slaves, maids, or women in financial difficulties. And so it's kind of, if we break against that grain, then we're not rewarded for that in some ways. And you know, there are some roles that we have to fill, and if we don't fulfill those roles, we don't get the rewards for that.
Yeah, just to jump in there, I think, Sam, what you were saying about kind of the recreation of racial trauma and this pigeonholing of like having to speak about identity, and oftentimes also speak about like Asian identity, even though that's, you know, a really contentious thing to do. And that really resonated with me, because I think looking at I guess shows I've watched in British media, but also just specifically on the reporting on coronavirus in the UK that I've seen, is that there's a huge emphasis on wanting us to be like the spokesperson for our victim narratives. And so, you know, there's this push to like, we want to hear from Asians talking about racism in the UK, but we only want it if you've been like beaten up, you know what I mean? And I think that's like, for me personally, as a journalist, I've like really tried to distance myself from it. And so the appearances and speaking engagements that I've been on talking about racism, I've tried very much to come at it from a policy perspective, because I refuse to kind of engage with that. Like, of course I've had racist encounters and experiences, but that's not everything that I bring to the table. And I think like when I've been interviewed on radio and television about racism, there's also another interesting thing where there's a lot of focus on like the severity of racism. So this idea of like how bad is bad enough for us to be able to talk about racism, not just in the UK, but in other countries. And I think that really is really insidious, because it distracts from a lot of issues of institutionalized racism that Asians already face in the UK well before this pandemic started, which I think the performances really spoke about really, really eloquently. And I think that it's, I'm not really sure like how to respond to that, but I think, it's important, of course, for us to be able to claim these victim narratives in a way, because we don't want other people to speak for us and for our experiences, but we need to also move beyond that and bring in analysis of these dynamics. And I'm really glad to see, I guess, like Sam and like others who are doing this in this space, because I think it's really important, because if we don't grasp these opportunities and these spaces, they're not really going to be given to us. And the second thing I wanted to point to is when Bex was talking about invisibility, just visible like invisibility on screens of people who look people of color and people of Asian ethnicity, and also this idea of the diaspora being invisible. This was really interesting to me, because I actually have never experienced this type of invisibility before. So when I was living in America, I felt very much that, like, maybe because I was living in California, but there was a very strong sense of Chinese American identity or Asian American identity. And there was a lot of Asian American stories being represented in Hollywood screens, I think, in comparison to the UK. So I feel like I can just list off a couple of shows or movies I've seen depicting like Asian American experiences, but not like British East Asian experiences. And I think that's something that's, quite interesting. And I never really, I guess, experienced or thought about it before I moved to the UK, to the extent that I was actually working, in a predominantly white newsroom in the UK on coronavirus stories. And I had this argument with a few people I was working with, because they wanted to say that there was a spike in racism against Southeast Asians, and I was like, no, you mean like Asians, because it's like Southeast East Asians, like Chinese. And then they were saying like, no, because in Britain, like when we say Asians, we mean South Asians. And then so I thought, oh, maybe it's just a terminology thing. But I actually looked at the census reports in the UK, and actually that's just not true. Like Chinese or East Asians fall within the bracket of Asians. It's just that they're so invisible in this country that we don't even think of them as Asian. They're like a separate, or like they don't even exist. And when we think of Asian, we think of people like brown people, which I think I've never experienced that before. And I find that very problematic. And I don't know how we can have that conversation or deal with this, but it's been very eye-opening being able to kind of see that, and very troubling as well.
Yeah, that's a very good perception. Have you had time to unpick why that might be the case then, why we are invisible in Britain? And as you say, there's so much more of a presence or visibility in places like America. Yeah,
I mean, I think, not being just being British by passport, but not having lived in the UK, what I think the biggest difference is just the size of the community. I think East Asians only rank about like 0.6% of the population here. And within that, there are so many different types of East Asians, right? It's not just Chinese, Vietnamese, Southeast Asians. And so there isn't just that like volume and mass of people and types of communities that you have in the US. And I think another issue as well is this idea that I think maybe it's a diaspora situation as well. I think there's a lot more like diaspora coming from China into America and the UK. I don't know, actually. I feel like maybe Sam and Bex would be better to respond to this.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to, we've got a few more minutes left, and I just wanted to pick up on something that Jennifer Lin said, which I think is really interesting. She says that as a group, British East Asians and Southeast Asians people are locked out of the diversity conversation altogether. And just go to Bex and just ask what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, I think that actually ties in with what Jessie was saying about how East Asians, British East and Southeast Asians, we don't seem to come under the umbrella of Asian. And when we have this diversity conversation, you just have to look at the acronym BAME, that's British, Asian, Minority Ethnic. and we don't consider ourselves under the umbrella Asian because we are not considered under that umbrella. I can certainly, when it comes to acting and casting, if I see a casting for a British Asian, I know they don't mean me. I know that I'm not up for that role. If you look at British Asian Network, which is the BBC Asian radio, that's not for us, that's for South Asians. So we are definitely, we don't come under that A of BAME. We're not considered under the umbrella of Asian. We also don't consider ourselves under it. We're not allowed to go into the A. So we kind of don't really feature anywhere. Like it's mad. Yeah, it's absolutely right what Jen says. Like, so we had something very recently with Beats. I think like it just happened a few days ago, which was that there's this race and health organization called Race and Health, and their inaugural panel, I think it was only yesterday, was about racism in the wake of COVID. So specifically it was about COVID racism. So obviously that's East Asians, right? There was no East Asian representation on that panel. We only found out about it because one of the people involved was East Asian. Someone in the organization had said to the organizers, shouldn't there be East Asian on the panel, and had been kind of dismissed. So this person came to us and we tweeted them and we were like, well, where's your East Asian on the panel? And they did finally get back today, and they had the panel and it didn't have an East Asian on, and they sent this statement saying, oh yeah, it's really bad that we didn't have an East Asian. It was just our first one, we'll try and get one for next time. It's like, we've been left out of this as well. Yeah. It's crazy, but it happens. And until we can just, I don't know how we change it. We just have to keep speaking up every time it happens, because hopefully this health organisation won't do that again. Yeah. But that they have to be called out in order to start actually involving us. It's just
absolutely. And Sam, have you got any thoughts on that? Why we've been left out of the diversity conversation?
Yeah, I think that's something I've also struggled with, to be honest. It's, you know, finding my voice in an industry where our voices all like seem very invisible. And I think even growing up, you know, my first introduction to the conversation of racism and having, you know, the vocabulary was always through hip hop. It was through the Black experience, but it wasn't an experience that we could relate with completely, you know, and through you know, Black media and even the scholars who I've studied, it's always been very Black oriented, and so I'm even finding difficulty to, you know, find more about how we fit into the conversation on race. So yeah, I don't really know, to be honest, but it's something that I'm if anyone does know, please reach out. I'd be happy to know.
And Jessie, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I thought of something, because I think from the short time that I've been, I guess, in the UK and been involved in amazing events like this, I think there's a real struggle, I think, with the diaspora community that I sense from this uneasiness of trying to differentiate, you know, from being, you know, from mainland China or from China. And I think I see kind of like more emphasis on like feeling the struggle of trying to differentiate, or like the confusion over differentiation, than asking the question of what is a diaspora itself. And I think that's quite interesting, because I think it feeds into this, I think I was talking to Jen and other people about this before a few weeks ago, but this idea that in the arts or mainstream arts in the West, they're really looking for this idea of Chinese authenticity, or like who can tell like the Chinese story, and this idea that we want to capitalize on this rising China and be able to like have like real stories from China. And so like, are you Chinese enough to be this Chinese person in this role? Or are you Chinese enough to tell the story from China? And I think, and it's from both sides. I think people who I've spoken to who are Chinese students or professionals studying from mainland China or from Hong Kong have this feeling of antagonism of like, when we see like a Western or like Asian or British Asian telling like a Chinese story from China, this idea that they don't represent us, and it gets really complicated. And I think it's these important discussions get subsumed over this need to I guess capitalize on the growing China trope. And I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about it, because yeah, it's definitely something that's been quite interesting for me to watch.
So I think we should open it out to the floor now, or the other people, the participants in the chat room. If anybody's got any questions, if they'd just like to raise their hand, and we can take questions from people in the audience. So there are no questions just now. You can also type your questions, and I can ask those questions out as well if you don't want to go on camera, or ask your question out verbally. So let's just go back to the question that Jess was saying about, you know, she'd be like really interested to for you guys just to say what your thoughts are on her musings about the situation in this country at the moment.
I've definitely felt that pressure to tell the Asian story, which I don't feel any ownership over, and which I don't feel like I can tell with authenticity. I feel like I can tell my story as a Eurasian who grew up here and lived in Malaysia, but you know, I can tell that very specific story, but it's very hard to feel like you're some kind of authority on the entire Chinese culture, whatever that is. We had a huge I don't know if I should even bring it up. No, I will. Living with the Lambs, we had this huge issue over a Chinese sitcom for CBBC last year, where they were trying to get writers to come in and write this awful sitcom. And I remember when they first brought me in for a meeting for it, before I went in, I looked at what it was and I was like, I don't know if I can write on a show that's about growing up in a genuine Chinese takeaway in Manchester. That's not my background. And I was really doubting whether I was the right person for the role. When I went in and met them and I read the first script and realized how awful a project it was, I didn't want anything to do with it. But at the first instance of finding out what the show was about and feeling, oh, that's not me, I'm not that person, and I'm not able to tell that story. Then the completely wild thing was that when I went in and found out who had written the first episode, it was a white woman who had even less right to the story than I had, but hadn't even questioned it, hadn't even questioned whether this was her story to tell. Yeah, I think we're definitely in a position as British East Asian creatives that we have this huge pressure to tell a genuine story, but also that we're not sure what we have ownership over.
Absolutely. So yeah, we do have one question. Julia has a question. Will Julia?
Hi there. Thanks very much for having me on. I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for each and every one of the performances that we've seen this evening. Incredible and really thought-provoking. So I know a lot of performers here are still on the Zoom call. So I just want to say thank you very much on behalf of everyone for the show that you've all done. My question is more. It's a question for, I guess, the whole floor, not just for the panel, but in terms of representation and for those of us, for the creatives, for example, any actors, any directors, any producers, any writers here, if you could name the single biggest blocker before you can get your show to the TV screen, or get your script produced, or get your film greenlit, or whatever it might be, you know, is it lack of finance? Is it lack of talent? Is it producers just being not interested in British East Asian work? What is the single biggest blocking factor, in your opinion, for why we have such a lack of representation on British screens? I guess that was the question. I know not all the panelists are actors, but any creatives who are still on the call wants to chime in, and it'd be very, you know, I'm not a creative myself, but it'd be good to understand why the industry has just never moved on, and what's blocking that progress.
It's hard to say if there's one single thing blocking. There's a lack of opportunities. I don't think there's a lack of talent. There's certainly not a lack of stories, and there's not a lack of storytellers, but there's definitely a lack of platforms. And I don't know if that's to do with who the gatekeepers are and who the producers are, and there's a really good foot. Sorry, just been distracted by Dan's foot. Sorry. Where were we? Yeah, so I think it would definitely help if we had more people in positions of actual power at the broadcasters who were able to greenlight these projects, because there's not a lack of them. It's quite depressing that since I can't even remember when I don't know if has there ever been a British East Asian show, The Chinese Detective in the 80s. We've not had anything. I definitely pitch things all the time and they don't go anywhere. So I don't know if there's anyone in this call who is in the industry and could shed some light. It would be nice to hear. I don't know why we don't have more opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Michael.
Sorry, it was just a response to Julia, or whoever is under Julia's name, the question there. I've actually, the funny thing that happened to me recently, and previously I worked mainly as an actor, so my experience of trying to get something sort of commissioned and as a writer is new. But I found that I've been sending my script out to certain channels, certain production teams, and it ranges from, they would tell me that it's a bit too stereotypical that that my family lived in a restaurant, and I was like, but that's I lived that. You say it's stereotypical, but I don't see any other shows out there written by an Asian person in the mainstream where we've been allowed to have our own voice and actually tell our own story, as Beck said about living with the lands. Someone else is writing it. So my response to that was just like, how can you say that my experience is stereotypical? I know it might be that, but it hasn't been represented by us yet. That's the problem. Is that, yes, okay, we might have been shown as takeaway owners in jokes, but we haven't been able to tell that story yet. And also they told me that my relationship with my mother was a bit too much, too Asian. It was too Asian. She didn't like the arts. And I was like, well, this is just part of my experience. And again, it's just being told weirdly that I am too stereotypical, but not. Them using that as a reason not to even though they say it's a stereotype, but for it to be a stereotype, it would have to have other stories out there representing it, but there's not.
So we've got 2 more people with questions, and we've only got a few more minutes left. So Jennifer and Leo, if you just want to quickly ask your questions, and maybe the panel might be able to encompass the answers within each of the 2 questions.
Rosa, it's actually a response to the question that Julia posed. So actually, if you'd want to move on, I'm happy to. Okay,
great. Leo?
Sorry, mine is also a response to what Julia asked.
Okay, that's okay. You can go ahead and give your responses.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'll go first. I guess there's 2 things with the representation of East Asians on stage and screen in our creative industries. There's firstly the East Asian stories that we want to tell, which is one thing, but then there's also the East Asian faces that we want to see. So there is, there's nothing stopping East Asians being cast in non-East Asian stories at the moment, but there is no reason why they shouldn't be. So in terms of where the blockage is in seeing those faces, not to put too crude a phrasing on it, but it's racism, right? I mean, That's all it is. But we are starting to see some steps forward. I thought like the David Copperfield film that came out last year, which was, you know, didn't pay any heed to trying to be historically correct, whatever that normally is used to mean, was perhaps a step forward in actually us breaking down these barriers of what we're used to seeing in terms of the kind of faces that are on our screens. In terms of the stories that we're telling, and like Michael was saying, this idea of kind of like when we're brought into the room, the stories that we're perhaps writing and commissioners are saying, yeah, well, that's kind of like too stereotypical. I always kind of like think, well, you know, it was quite stereotypical for Phoebe Waller-Bridge to write about being an upper class white woman, as she, like that's not necessarily a barrier to stories being made. So again, I guess if I was going to give a crude answer to why our stories aren't being told, it's racism.
Okay, well, I think that just brings us to the end of the discussion, and there's just one other thing that I'd just like to say before we close the panel discussion. It's just to say that all the donations from the We Are Not Virus weekend event will be donated to the Black Lives Matter Fund, and some of the creatives have also donated their fees to the course as well. There will be a link that goes up, so anybody who would like to donate can also do that. We're going to close the chat room now, but anybody that wants to stay online, and maybe, I don't know, Jennifer, if you wanted to say what you wanted to say after we close proceedings, that would be great. But for now, we're going to close officially the panel. So thanks very much, everybody.
Hi folks. I don't know if anybody's actually here listening. It's a bit odd.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Oh, you're listening, great. Yeah, thank you, great. Yes, so I guess what I wanted to talk about in response to Julia's question was just from an audience perspective, and purely from a theatre audience perspective, and that is, from a really cynical and brutal point of view, it also comes down to economics. And that is, when a theatre is looking to programme a show, they're looking at where the audience sits. And if they don't see a big East Asian audience, and unfortunately our stories still sit in that kind of niche category, this is a niche show, this has a very small audience, it means that they are less likely to programme that work because they see it as a risk. Now, that is obviously due to what Leo was saying in terms of racism. It also means that they're not understanding that the East Asian experience in its specificity is also a universal experience of all minority experience. And that is a lack of foresight from their point of view. But also I think it means that we need to work harder to diversify our audiences, to make sure that actually when we present East Asian work, we are showing up en masse, to make sure that those cultural leaders are seeing that there is an East Asian audience and they want to see our work and they deserve to see our work. Because unfortunately, at the end of the day, it is an industry. I'm talking about theatre here specifically, but it is an industry and it is a business. And they need to see that their economic investment is going to pay dividends, especially with COVID. You know, we are now working in a time where risks are going to have to be paid back, and I think it's important that we as a community are showing up to show by our presence that we want to see this work and that there is an audience for this work. So I guess, yes, I absolutely understand it is a thing about racism, inherent in systemic racism, but also we can combat that by showing up and showing our presence as well. That's all I kind of wanted to say on that.
Hi. I was just going to respond to that, actually, if I can. Am I allowed? Yeah, I take that point, Jen, but I have to say, every time people have put on an East Asian play in the last 6 years, that the sales figures have been really good. It's funny, I was in one of the FIMBRA in 2016, Pyongyang, which was in a really problematic spot. It was in the first show in January. And every time I've seen Neil McPherson since, he's like, I really want another one of those, because we sold out of the rafters. We could have gone on for another 2-3 weeks probably. And I can't think of one that's really sold badly, actually. I mean, in terms of mega commercialism, in terms of running in the West End, we probably would struggle. But it's like when we did Snow Midsummer at the Swan, at the RSC. The Swan, sometimes they really, really, really struggle. I mean, the season I was up there afterwards, they had Salome on and stuff like that, and really, really struggle for audiences. Snow in Midsummer was a huge hit up there, audience-wise. The Middle England Stratford audience just rocked up. And they just loved it so much. We were always sort of, you know, I'd say, I don't know, 2/3, 3/4 full, very full some nights. And I do think that's a kind of perception in a weird kind of way. I'm not sure it's really that true.
Dan, can I just come back at you on that?
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right. We can sell out the FIMBRA, we can sell out the Arcola, we can sell out CPT, we can pack out the Swan 2/3 full, but we're not in the RST. We're not in the Dorfman. We're not in the main houses. Oh, I can see Leo being like, yeah, come at me, come on.
The one time the Dolphin did pack out, I think, and the RST, they struggle with everything apart from the GCSE, the Romeo and Juliet Midsummer Scene. They struggle. They can't sell it at all. They put on Choice and Cressida last year. They bombed. They had 28 performances, like a fringe run. They bombed. I don't think.
I just got to use the royal, we were at the Dorfman, and it was an all East Asian cast written by an East Asian writer, and regardless of the merits or not of the show, it sold incredibly well, a lot better than I think the next time I went to go see a show at the Dorfman Theatre, which was Peter Brook's show, which had about 40 people there the night I was there. So I agree. Because we are a very, very small percentage of the population, we might not necessarily have the same footfall that you maybe get with other plays written by people of colour. But still, you've got to question something like why the Dorfman was putting that Peter Brook show in there, willing to spend all that money on that Peter Brook show being there, marketing it incredibly strongly, when it had in the past 12 months experience of how well other shows sold there, which might have been something that they wouldn't have taken a risk on previously. And this whole conflation of risk with diversity just has no evidence to it. Eclipse Theatre Company, which is based in Sheffield and mainly which promotes black theatre, but uses kind of like a more 1980s definition of black to mean no one, not white people, did a really, really interesting report a few years ago with their show called Black Men Walking, which was a massively successful show, talking to all of these people who had not commissioned the show in the regions or who wouldn't normally commission the show. And it was because they say it's risky. But if they say the term risky, but there is no evidence to suggest that the rationale they're making in their head, diversity equals risk, if that's not true, I'm like, this is kind of the point I was trying to pithily and make earlier. When the excuse is not rational, look for the irrational excuse, which is racism. So, right? But so I think a lot of the cogency that these commissioners try to make to why we don't commission these shows, it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
Yeah, I just want to say something as well, if I may, just add on very, 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 in a very succinct way. You know, Jen, you mentioned about that. I mean, like the Young Vic, you know, I mean, Wild Swans, I'm not judging on its merits or anything, it was sold out way before it started. But, and then since then, funnily enough, we've never seen another East Asian play or another East Asian actor in there, you know, at the Young Vic. So I don't know. I think a lot of the time, when people say that, you know, it's economics, but then what drives economics behind that? You know, even when you have the evidence right in front of you, when you can pack shows out, you got people queuing up to see shows and shows being sold out, and still people not capitalizing on that and not doing that. I think that there are more other reasons behind it. And I'm just going to echo what Leo said. I think there is some form of racism going on there, you know, yeah. Because if you've got shows that actually sold out and people do want to come and see it, and they're not just British East Asian audiences. I mean, a lot of them came out to support it, but a lot of also mainstream audiences came to see it too, and people are interested, you know, in the narratives. But it's just that it's just not being put on. So I would question the motive behind that and why the inertia as well.
Guess what?
Can I just read out Kevin's comment, which came in a little while ago? He's just on that, what you were saying, Jennifer, and it chimes in with what you guys are saying as well. He said, the ironic thing is that when you go to the theatre and count people of colour in the audience and the big mainstream super white houses, as I am want to do, East Asians probably are the most represented minority. So I do also think that the audience don't come is another systematic racist trope used by programmers not to program Asian work.
And I'm just going to pipe in as well. I mean, I think it's, I mean, we're going to keep using examples of Asian work. I mean, Yellowface, we sold out like crazy in both our venues, more so than you know, the shows that followed us and before and after the shed. And when I was trying to program that, the excuses that I kept getting were people don't, we can't bring East Asians to the theater. Nobody will come. This is too esoteric. Nobody wants to see East Asians. And the thing is, you put it on, and this is the thing is, like, theater is, if it's good, like, people will come. And so they just have to put on good East Asian work, regardless of, you know, and you can sell out mainstream houses with not necessarily all Asian people because the work is good. And it's just another racist trope that they just keep saying as this risk-taking thing. I think the other thing that I wrote basically is also that all the programming that happens in these big houses is oftentimes the programming of these white racist dudes who are giving us their perspective of what they think Asians should be like. I always call it, you know, Mao era peasant porn that, you know, the British theater masturbates to. And it's like, well, East Asians, like, I come out to support it, and I cringe to come out to support it because I don't want to see that stuff. That's what, like, old white dudes think that mainstream audiences want to see East Asians on stage doing. But, you know, and it's like, if you put actual stuff that is programmed from an East Asian kind of perspective, not only will you get East Asians out, but you will also get mainstream audiences out. So that's my 2 cents. I think it's all racism again. I think we're all just preaching to the choir, talking about the structural systemic racism of theater industry here. So.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I didn't realise you were there. Sorry, I was just like reading out because you, you just typed it in there. Anybody else got anything? Jennifer, you wanted to chip in again, didn't you?
No, I think that my hand is raised from a previous point.
Okay, but we've got, oh, she's under the name of Daniel, Jennifer.
Hi, it's Jessie. Am I?
Jessie,
no,
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was like still actually here, but with a friend. But I actually want to say, like, I was really interested in hearing what everybody was saying just now, and it's really interesting discussion. And it's actually something that I'm interested in writing about and have tried to research. And just so if you kind of have similar thoughts or kind of like research or like news that pop up in this vein of discussion, I'd very much welcome any of you to message me because I'd love to hear from you. I can put my website or email in the chat box, I think, if that's of interest. But yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, I think that's probably it now, isn't it? Yeah. Should we all go to the bar and have a drink? Just like to say thank you to Jennifer and Daniel for putting on such an amazing event. It's been absolutely amazing. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the programme tomorrow, which I know I've now got a link for. So yeah, really looking forward to that. So yeah, well done. And thank you everybody else.
I had one job tonight, which was to let people in from the waiting room, and yeah, that was all the stress I could handle. I'm telling you that. I'm glad mine tomorrow is pre-recorded. That's all I'm going to say. Bye.